All right, so couple of housekeeping pieces. Next week, I kind of flipped a couple things. So we're going to be doing this lecture today, and then next week we're going to be talking about graphing and analysis, which was supposed to be this week. So a little bit shorter, but that's going to be fine for what we need to do. Next week will be the last week of class. So the following week, we will not have class. All right. So week 14, we'll have class. Week 15, which will be the week before finals week, you will have time to work on your final projects. All right. That will be your release time for that. So 2 more today, and then Tuesday and Thursday, and then we're done. All right. Anybody have a problem with that? Didn't think so. Okay. On Tuesday, I will outline the final project in full, so that you will know exactly what you need to do for that. Okay. Any questions on any of the assignments? Anything that's kind of left out there hanging? There's one small assignment that's coming today. At this point, the constructed response, I'm not worried about hard deadlines for that. Get that in when you get that in. This, get it in when you get it in, and then focus on the final project. Everything is due. Anything that you have yet to turn in is due by May, I think it's 5th. Is that the Wednesday? Let me double check on that. Yes, May 5th. That is the last day to get anything in, including the final, to ensure that it is graded by the time all grades are due. Okay. So Tuesday, we will go over the final project. I would recommend, if you can, bringing laptops on Tuesday, because we'll be doing some Excel stuff that I was going to do this past Tuesday, but didn't. Thursday, we'll do some talk about analysis, and then that will be it for class. Okay. Sound good? All right, cool. So today, what I want to talk about is something that I've alluded to a couple of times when I was talking about constructed assessments. We're talking this idea of performance, and then as it relates to special education, portfolio assessments. So when the vast majority of assessment that we look at are selected response, constructed response, and then there's this moment-to-moment idea where assessment where the question and answer, whiteboard responses, the things that happen naturally in the classroom. But there are other types of activities that we do that we can get information about where students are. Students can demonstrate information to us, and we are able to assess. And many of these activities, we don't even look at, I don't want to say as educational, because they're definitely, we look at them as educational, but we don't look at them in the same way that we look at like the more traditional test type activities. These activities are performance activities, and when we use them as assessment, they are performance assessments. When you can demonstrate something, when you can create something, when you can apply something, when you can actually go and do the thing in some way, shape, or form, that is a performance assessment. In special education, for certain students, there's opportunities to rely heavily on these types of assessments for the entirety of the assessment cycle, and that ends up being a portfolio assessment. So we'll get to that in a sec. Oops. All right, so how many of you are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy? Seen that before? Okay, good. Bloom's taxonomy is a really, it's a good visual. It's an important way of looking at the types of questions that we ask of our students. We know that we very much want to be up here in the evaluation, synthesis, analysis levels, away from the knowledge and comprehension levels as much as possible. But it is important to know that we do have to address these types of skills. And it's also important to know that no matter what grade you are working on, you are going to have kids that are only ready for these types of skills or are ready for these types of skills, lower and higher, right? As a second grade teacher, for any lesson, I would have kids who needed to know the very, very basics, all the way up to those who had already mastered the content and were really piecing the whole thing together into the real world, right? So don't think that this is a secondary problem. Secondary, don't think that this bottom part is an elementary problem. You will always have students that are everywhere on this spectrum, all right? If not in one class or in 1 year, then definitely over time. How many of you have seen this before? Gardner's multiple intelligences. And sorry, it's a little small. Yeah, a little bit, couple, some no? Okay. This is a way of analyzing knowledge, not in a hierarchical way, but in terms of how one relates to the material. All right. Gardner's multiple intelligences is a graphic that is able to say, all right, we have some kids who are really good at verbal linguistics. They might be good at the written word, potentially the spoken word, using word to demonstrate knowledge and information. We may have a child who is good at interpersonal knowledge, being able to relate things to themselves, being able to relate themselves to the world. Maybe we have people who are logical or mathematical, have this type of knowledge where everything is a logic puzzle. Everything has to have an order. How many of you can recognize some of these things in yourselves, right? These ideas are typically looked at as strengths within children. If you have a child who fits in the logic mathematical section, you're probably going to say, well, they're good at math, they're going to struggle in ELA. If you have someone who's in the words or the interpersonal, they might be good at ELA, but not as much at math, or this or that or the next thing. Naturalistic, wherever that is, there you go. They're good at the sciences, things like that. However, I don't think that it is appropriate for us to look at either Bloom's taxonomy or Gardner's multiple intelligences as a static picture of a child. Rather, what we can try to do is say, okay, let's say that my child is working on it or is good at something on the comprehension level. Can I use that to expand into the application level? Can I use the current level that they are on to expand to something that they are not as strong with or not as familiar with? Same with Gardner's multiple intelligences. Can I use an area of strength to bring out an area of weakness? The children that we, either in our own lives when we were younger or as teachers, that we identified as being a cut above, are not necessarily those who are smarter or who know more. It's those who can demonstrate things in a lot of different ways. The kid who was good at math and good at reading and good at writing and played an instrument and was really active and was good at science and did all these things, who was able to demonstrate knowledge in all these different ways, that well-rounded student, that's the student that we recognize as being a cut above, right? That idea should be a goal for all of our students. Not saying that everyone's going to get there, but that should be the target. So what I have today is a way to look, and sorry, let me going back to this. First of all, starting with Bloom's, we should be able to see that not all of these levels on Bloom's can be assessed or taught through selected response, and constructed response. We should be able to see that these intelligences definitely can't be assessed or taught just through selected response or constructed response. If we are going to truly teach and truly assess in this expanded type of way, we have to have other projects, other activities, other means for both allowing kids to learn things and allowing them to demonstrate that knowledge to us. All right. So when we combine the two, when we combine Bloom's taxonomy with Gardner's multiple intelligences, I think it's the other way around. Bloom's taxonomy across the top, but with Gardner's multiple intelligences along the side. This is going to create a matrix that would allow us to look at any one activity in however 7 times 8 different ways, right? However many levels there actually are, I can't remember. This concept, this tool that we end up with is called the Hecox integration matrix. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. I know that's hard to read. Don't worry about trying to read the words. But does this starts to make a little bit of sense, okay? So across the top, we have Bloom's taxonomy. Knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, evaluation, synthesis. Down the side, we have Gardner's multiple intelligences. Verbal linguistic, visual spatial, logical mathematical, keeps going. Naturalistic, musical, bodily kinesthetic, intrapersonal, and interpersonal. The tiny writing up here are the key words that key into that you would look for in like a prompt. So evaluation is judge, predict, verify, assess, justify, rate, prioritize, so on and so forth. Verbal linguistic activities are poetry, debate, storytelling, essay, checklist, and journal. All right. For any given topic, for any given unit, for any given standard, what we can do is fill in activities that fit in each of these boxes. So if I am teaching main character, all right, I could find a verbal linguistic way at the knowledge level to address main character. I could find a verbal linguistic way at the comprehension level to address main character, so on and so forth. A visual spatial way, drawing, model, poster, photograph, storyboard, illustration, board game. At the analysis level, compare, contrast, classify, critique, categorize, yada, 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 to address main character. So for one student, I could say, write a checklist listing the characteristics of the main character. I'm assessing the verbal linguistic knowledge level. I could say, draw a picture comparing and contrasting the main character in story 1 with the main character in story 2. Visual spatial analysis. Same assessment, different tools, different levels, but still main character. All right. If you are able, and I wouldn't say do this in year 1 of teaching, but over time, if you can collect activities for all of these different things, for everything that you teach, you now have, the way that I look at it is you can now lesson plan for any kid, any differentiation, anything, right? You have this database of activities that can allow you to assess, to reach any kid at any level who demonstrates knowledge in any way. To me, that's a really, really powerful tool. What I think is even more important is that for any one child, let's say, especially going down. So you know, we're a 4th grade classroom, we're working on this application analysis level. We're not so worried about pushing up we've established going down. But I can present information across these multiple different intelligences, right? And through various activities in my class, I can create more well-rounded students. Not that they are necessarily all going to get there, but I can set the stage to be able to present information in all these different ways. So if I have a child who is struggling with essay writing, I can give them a visual spatial, a drawing, or a what do I want to say? You could do a musical one, you could do lyrics, you could do poetry, you could do all these different types of activities where I may say, okay, we still need to work on this skill so you can pass a test. But when it comes to assessment, I have identified that you have the knowledge. You've expressed it to me in a way that is meaningful to you. That's the information that you need for assessment. Not testing, but assessment. So what this allows us to do is to get out of the box of only using our traditional selected and constructed responses as assessment tools. When we can get high quality activities that are meaningful to students in different means, we're able to assess in different ways. These are the activities that kids look forward to. This is go around the room and measure something. This is draw the picture. This is let's go on a nature walk and categorize things. These are the activities that break up the traditional school day that really get kids going. And the more of these activities that kids are comfortable with or demonstrating knowledge through, the better off they are going to be as individuals. All right. How many of you have had experiences giving, not that you thought of it that way, but giving performance assessments before, or doing performance assessments as yourself, as a student? Anyone remember, have anything that sticks out from when you guys were kids? When you guys were in elementary and high school? Nothing? Just bookwork all the time? Memorize the textbook?
We all blocked out the trauma.
Fair enough.
Like field trips count?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like going to the zoo.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully when you went to the zoo, it wasn't just go and look at all the animals, right? It was talk about them, draw them, experience them, find your favorite ones, categorize. You did all these different things. So that's from an instructional standpoint, right? Not necessarily an assessment standpoint, but it's very much getting you there. And then that person who really connects to that experience, that naturalist experience, you bring that back into the classroom. And then let's say you hate writing. Now take the thing that you loved and use that to write about. It's going to be a lot easier when you have that experience that you are comfortable with to expand it to the experience that you are less comfortable with. All right. No, I'll just leave it at that. Okay. So what we are going to do, or what you guys are going to do with this is, and this is, I'm not sure the math project is perfect for this. So I'm fine if you want to select something a little bit different. But for your assignment for this, I want you to be coming up with multiple activities for one unit or standard. All right. So you're going to, I think I said ask for 9 activities. So it doesn't have to be the most in-depth description, just a quick little sentence or two of what you would do. But for 3 different, let's say 3 to 4 different levels of Gardner's multiple intelligences, you're going to come up with multiple levels of Bloom's taxonomy for each one. So let's say you do the musical level. You would choose comprehension and evaluation. Totally making this up. All right. So, or knowledge, application, and analysis. 9 total boxes. I had in my head 9 doing 3, 3, and 3. But so you're not going to do every multiple intelligence. You're not necessarily going to do every level of Bloom's. But for whichever multiple intelligence you choose, I want you to be able to do multiple levels of Bloom's for that. All right? That makes sense? A little bit? So you're effectively coming up with 9 different activities that you could use, I would say, as either instruction or assessment across the multiple intelligences and Bloom's. All right. You can use your math standard. That can turn into an item on your final. That's fine. You can choose something different if you just want to break from looking at that thing for a second. That's totally fine too. Really kind of open, but I want that's what I'm looking for here. All right. Questions? No, this is individual. Yeah. This is individual. All right. That makes sense? I'll try and make it as clear as possible on Moodle. I know that wasn't perfect. Okay. All right. So what, and I've touched on this already, but what is the need for performance assessments? And then as we move into special education, how does that apply to portfolio assessments? So I do struggle with this, and I'm curious to see what you guys think as well. We've talked about this a little bit before, but the need to get information from students or get information across to students contrasted with the ways in which we communicate as adults. That's the balance for me. How many of you hate multiple choice? Everyone loves multiple choice. How many of you would rather do a project or a final grade versus multiple choice? Okay, so that's your performance assessment. Multiple choice, how many of us communicate to our friends, our peers, our colleagues through multiple choice? Maybe if you're asking a friend, like, here are your 3 options for dinner, where do you want to go? Right? That's about it. We also don't just communicate through essays. We communicate by doing. We communicate through these interactions. My ability to convey an idea to a colleague through all sorts of different components, whether it's an email, whether it's in a faculty meeting, whether it's on a phone call, whether it's drawing a diagram. These are all performance assessments or performance activities, right? We don't focus on those things enough. However, written communication of all the things that we do, written communication is still the biggest piece of the pie. Replacing multiple choice with performance assessments, I think, is definitely a good idea. But the problem with that is the performance assessment is on one thing. You can't cover the breadth of a topic through an individual performance assessment, or it's very challenging to. But giving students that opportunity to use that as a formal assessment allows for something, to me, that is much more meaningful. I don't know where I'm going. It's just, this is something that I've really struggled with. Like I want to I always want to use performance assessments more than we do. I want those performance assessments to be more than just essay or written, but we really need to develop those essays and that writing in general, because we do that so much. But we also need to cover everything. We also need to cover the breadth of a curriculum in our assessments. Multiple choice fills in those gaps. Essays allow for, or constructed responses allow for that development of writing, and performance assessments allow for those that are kind of left in between. I do think a good assessment probably has all three. I do think a good assessment allows for children to demonstrate that knowledge and that information in multiple ways. I also think that that makes it, that's the hardest possible way for a teacher to actually physically grade something, right? With multiple choice being the easiest, performance assessments probably being the hardest because they're the most subjective, essays being somewhere in the middle, erring on the side of the performance. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. Trying to find how to get the most meaningful information in an expedient way is not easy. What do you guys think, as guys who are ready to be teachers in the next couple of years? Where do you see performance assessments falling into your assessment repertoire? Yeah.
I'm very consumer science, so like a lot of my stuff is skills. So having performance assessment is one of the like common ways that.
Absolutely, right? When there are certain applied areas that totally rely on performance assessment almost exclusively. You get it, right? Like, I don't care if you can write about this, do it. Show me that you can actually do it. Good. What else? Secondary. Where do you guys see performance assessment?
I feel like it's hard because, like, I can't think of anything to be. I feel like a lot of high school students, like, I don't know. I always felt embarrassed anytime I had to like get up and like actually do things personally. So I don't know. I feel like it might be an ego thing.
Okay.
I not want to do that.
Was something like a seminar or like a discussion?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that the challenge is thinking of almost as many non-traditional ways as possible to assess students, right? So it doesn't have to be like get up and perform. It can be very much still an individual person doing their individual thing. But there's just so many more ways to demonstrate knowledge than right. And right. And I don't know. What about elementary? What do you guys think?
I mean, in elementary, it's easier because kids love to move around. If you could get them to go outside or whatever, and that's part of the assessment, it's wonderful. And then not only that, but like diagnosticians, how they diagnose students with learning disabilities or any kind of mental disability. A lot of that is done through performance stuff rather than like write down what I just, what you just read.
Absolutely. So that's actually, we're going to get to that in a second because I do think that's a really, really good point. When I was teaching second grade, probably my kids, this had to be the case every year, but our favorite activity was non-standard units of measurement. All right. So measure how many paper clips your desk is, right? How many paper clips long your desk is. That's an easy one. But the one they all absolutely loved, and this is exactly what a performance assessment is all about, is how many second grade students long is your classroom. And they all get down head to toe and measure it. And then we discuss the problems with that. Well, this kid's 5 feet tall and this kid's 2 feet tall. And, like it just gets kids so much more involved. And that gives them the experience to then do all the other things. At the secondary level, science labs. That's where my mind goes right away, right? The chemistry lab where I totally failed, of here's this substance, use all your tools available to tell me what elements are in there, right? That's a performance assessment. That was my junior year chemistry final. I did not do well. But that to me is so much more appropriate than answering a multiple choice on some chemical compound, right? It doesn't mean anything. Apply it. Do it. Actually do the thing. Yeah.
You were talking about the secondary, like things to do, and now that we're talking about it, in high school, I had one teacher. He's the only one I remember because I just blocked out the rest of it. He had us do the most involved stuff, and I think that class, out of every class, we had a better connection. Everybody had a better relationship with each other in that class than any class where we just kind of read through Romeo and Juliet or whatever.
Yeah, right.
And he had us make commercials. He had us do debates, and it was much more. I remember I learned way more in his class than any class.
That's and it gives you one. It breaks up the day because all we do is read and write. But it gives you it shows you that there is a reality to what you are learning, rather, right? It shows you that there is this real world sense of what you are doing. There's some way to do it. Not that any student is going to, lie down and measure something. But how many of you have measured something by going like that before? Right? Okay. Then I go like this. And it's 2 of me, and then it's 3 of me. Okay, I need 18 feet of rope for this project, or wood for this project, right? So there's that concept derives from that performance assessment 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, right? So having these experiences, going back to here, expands what a student the way a student can think about something. That creates your well-rounded student. Okay. Yep. That's exactly what I just said. Okay. Skip that. Okay. Let's talk a little bit now about portfolio assessments. So the portfolio assessments, when it comes to special education, are logistically governed by laws within, I think it's state laws, but every state has them. Only X percentage of students within a population can receive portfolio assessments. All right. So when we talk about portfolio assessments, we are talking about a very, very narrow range of students who can access this level of assessment. And they are the students who truly cannot contact the regular education curriculum. Those students where traditional assessment methods are not relevant to what the student is capable of. All right. When you think of a portfolio, what comes to mind for me is like an art portfolio or photography portfolio, where you have this collection of works that demonstrates what someone has done. Right? That is the definition of portfolio here. So a performance portfolio assessment is a collection of activities that is used, that was done over the course of time, that is used as the assessment tool for these students. What is unique, or what is challenging for those who you are conducting portfolio assessments with, is the standards remain the same. So if I have a 4th grade student who is on a portfolio assessment, the pieces that go into that portfolio have to demonstrate the 4th grade standards in some way, shape, or form. All right. So if I don't know the 4th grade standards, so probably poor choice for me to choose it. But if you are doing an ELA standard that has to do with comparing and contrasting fiction characters in some way, shape, or form, you have to have a performance assessment in there that you can in some way say assesses that standard. All right. Now, what behaviors actually are omitted to address that standard are very, very subjective and up to the teacher. All right. So can I have a drawing that assesses that standard? Yes. Can that drawing be supported by the teacher? Yes. Can it be after having read a story that was not necessarily on 4th grade level? Yes. So the level of support, the level of prompting, the level of or what was done to get there is not dictated by the law. But what you have to do is ensure that the standard, that's the piece that is dictated by the law, that the standard is the grade level standard. All right. The challenge with portfolios is identifying the rubrics that you are going to use to assess those pieces. So, you know, these are all things that apply to any sort of performance task, right? Whether from essays all the way up. But we have to make sure that we have multiple evaluative criteria. We have to make sure that there are these pre-specified quality standards, and we have to make sure that there's some judgmental appraisal. This is the opposite of what we look for in something like a standardized test, right? In our portfolio assessments, our performance assessments, we have to make sure that, we have to make sure that we are giving our students as much of an opportunity to demonstrate as much information in any way possible. All right. How that information is demonstrated is not dictated. Coming up with the rubrics that can encompass something that wide is in my experience, the hardest part here. And you can't, you really can't have the rubric until you know what the level of the student is, what their capabilities are, what types of activities they're going to be doing. But before you actually complete the activity itself, you have to have that evaluation tool ready to go. All right. Portfolio assessments are put together over time. They don't have to be performance assessments. Actually, if you have an essay, if you have a unit test from let's say a math test that involves multiple choice questions that is appropriate for the student, you can use those things. But it's still going to be always going to be a collection of work over time, as opposed to like a LEAP test or an end of year test or some set of benchmarks. I go over it quickly because most of you aren't going to be in self-contained classes. Those who are going to be in self-contained classes are most likely not going to still not going to have this apply to you. But it's important to know that there is a mechanism out there to use these performance assessments. These are not things that are just kind of like, oh, I wish we did more of these in schools. They are used, and they are used with a purpose. So there is some ground for being able to understand and justify their wider use. All right. That wasn't exactly what I wanted to say, but it gets it across. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. I'm going to stop it there. Are there any questions about performance assessments, Hecox integration matrix, activity? I'll clarify that on Moodle.
If you have, like we write a typical like objective for the day in our typical class, in our inclusive classroom. If we have a student who might be gifted, do we want to write an objective that we keep to ourselves that we want to see them do? Like, so if I have students who are kind of at the analysis level, whatever, or apply level, but I have one student who's on create, do I want to make an objective set for him for whenever I go to assess him?
So there's a little bit of difference between differentiation and I'll say special education, including gifted. All right. So the standard or the objective for the day shouldn't change. The activity may change.
Oh, I see.
All right. The important part about, I don't like that this is the case, but it is the case. Assessment related to a grade is assessing the grade level standard. So you're not in what you are putting up on your board on a given day. That's not going to differentiate above or below. That's going to be the grade level expectation that's there for everybody. The activity that you do may push or differentiate down.
I see.
That makes sense?
Yes.
All right, cool. Good question. Anything else? All right, sounds good. So next week, we will talk a little bit about graphing and analysis. Keep an eye out for that, or the project's up there. If you're good with it, then go ahead and get started. But I will add a little bit more verbiage to that to make it a little bit more clear. And then Tuesday, we will go over final project in full. All right. All right. Have a good one.